Dear students, today we will continue our discussion on NMR spectroscopy. In the last class, we have discussed the NMR sensitivity and what are the parameters that influence the NMR sensitivity. So all those aspects we have learned. And in the present class, mostly we will concentrate on one aspect, that is how one can actually detect the NMR signal. There is a nice, beautiful explanation and theory, and we will try to understand that. And similarly, if time permits, we will also see what is NMR relaxation and how it is related with the spectral width or the NMR signal width, that we will try to understand if time permits. As we have learned in the previous class, in order to understand the NMR signal recording process, one has to understand, there are two ways that we can understand this particular process, and these are actually known as a classical description as well as a quantum mechanical description. There are two descriptions out there to understand how NMR signal is being recorded by the instrument. Okay, so classical description, very simple words. It is nothing but if you talk about in terms of spins, then we say that is a classical descriptions, right? We know that if you place non-zero spin nuclei in the external magnetic field, it precesses. Okay, depending upon the strength of the magnetic field, it will actually precess with a certain frequency. That frequency, what is referred to as the Larmor frequency, right? So if you are talking about in terms of spinning nuclei, and that particular concept, what is referred to as the classical description. On the other hand, there is another thing also happen, another explanation. When you place a magnetically active nuclei in the external magnetic field, so the nuclear spin energy states basically split into 2 or 3 based on the spin quantum number. That also we have learned, right? So before, in absence of the magnetic field, the nuclei energy states are actually said to be degenerate. But the moment you keep it, the nuclei, magnetically active nuclei in the external magnetic field, the nuclear energy states splits, right? Depending upon the strength of the magnetic field, that they basically split. And gamma H cross B0 is the energy gap between the two energy states. If you are thinking about a half spin nuclei, for example, proton or maybe 19 fluorine and so on, right? So, and if you are talking about in terms of the nuclear energy states, then such a description, what is referred to as a quantum mechanical description, okay? Because quantum mechanics only brought the idea of the energy quantization, right? So like electronic energy levels are quantized, vibrational energy levels are quantized. So these are all the things that we have already experienced in the last semester. So if you are talking about anything with regard to the energy states, be it a nuclear energy state or the vibrational energy state or the electronic energy states, then we say it is basically a quantum mechanical description of the concept, whatever it may be. So coming to this, the NMR spectroscopy, suppose if you talk about nuclear energy states and the population and the population arrangement between these two things, that particular description, what is referred to as the quantum mechanical description. Well, why we actually think about both these descriptions? Well, there are historical reasons why we basically talk these two descriptions. Just to understand the concept, the quantum mechanical description seems to be very good and very straightforward, but it doesn't basically illustrate actually how the NMR signal is being recorded. Therefore, that the classical, so-called the classical description is something that actually explains very nicely how the signal is recorded. On the other hand, but that is not very perfect explanation. So people started using both these explanation parallelly to basically uh, give the concept to the students. So the same thing I shall do that. So whenever I talk about the population and the nuclear energy states and the population and the transitions, basically you have to understand that is a quantum mechanical description. And whenever I just speak about spinning nuclei, and then it is basically arranged in a cone of angles on. So basically, you have to imagine that is a classical description. Well, with this background, let us start understanding how this process actually takes place. So, well, classically, we know that if you are having a non-zero spin quantum number nuclei, then when you place it in external magnetic field, it starts precessing with a certain frequency. I mean, the frequency what is referred to as the Lambert frequency, which is given by gamma b0 by 2 pi. Then, in absence of, we will just start from the scratch. Basically, in absence of magnetical, if there is no magnetic field, what exactly happens is the spins, alpha spins and beta spin. Okay, please remember that we only discuss about half spin nuclei. So you will have two a spin state, that is alpha spin state and then beta spin state, and both are degenerate in terms of in absence of external magnetic field. And if you talk about the spin, how they basically arrange in the in absence of external magnetic field, it is like very random motion, and so therefore there will not be any net magnetization vector, right? So all the spins basically orient in different direction in the space. So naturally, when you try to take the net magnetization, so there won't be any magnetization. So the magnetization is said to be zero. And these you can actually pictorially represent. We can represent something like this. You can see here in terms of the nuclear spins are shown with arrows, and these arrows are, as you can see, they are basically randomly arranged in a given volume. And the moment you place them in the external magnetic field strength of B0, so you will see some type of alignment, and then most of the nuclei basically arranged with respect to the applied magnetic field. On the other hand, some of the nuclei basically do orient opposite, do oppose the external magnetic field, and then we can see two different orientations. Of course, majority of the nuclei basically parallel to the applied magnetic field, and some of them basically arranged basically opposing the external magnetic field strength. Okay, so this is the scenario that we see when there is no external magnetic field and when there is external magnetic field. Okay, and the moment you place it in the external magnetic field, actually if you see in the microscopic level, there are two things happen, and the two things are basically uh, the alpha and then beta spins basically rearrange. Okay, they try to rearrange between the two spin nuclear energy states. Between the two nuclear spin energy states, we have the alpha spin. Alpha is nothing but the spin which is basically pointing towards pointing parallel to the applied magnetic field. That will be basically, those spins basically try to occupy the nuclear energy state, lower nuclear energy spin state, whereas the beta spin basically occupy the energy state which is basically little higher in energy state. Okay, so beta spin will be spins will be occupying the higher nuclear energy state, whereas alpha spin arranged between the arranged in the lower energy spin state. Okay, so this is what exactly happens. So not only that, there is another thing also happen. Okay, so the population also, this population changes. Okay, the orientation is one thing, and then population is one thing. Okay, so there is a nice thermal equilibrium basically established between the alpha and beta spin. The aligning with respect to the applied magnetic field and opposing the applied magnetic field is one thing. Secondly, and this number is also changing. What is changing? The number of spins is also changing. There are more number of alpha spin which are basically pointing towards the applied magnetic field strength, and then as compared to the alpha spins, there are beta spins which are basically opposing. So these are the two different things that happens. Of course, please remember that these things are only true for the nuclei where the gamma is positive. If gamma is negative, then the alpha spins will be occupying the higher energy state, and beta spin will be occupying the lower spin and nuclear spin energy state. So this imbalance basically causes what is referred to as the net magnetization vector, which we can see in this cone representation of the nuclear spins. Okay, so this is another representation that we are representing the nuclear spins alpha, and we have the alpha spins and then beta spins. In the vector model, we can represent them. How? Well, so the vector cone model, so most of the nuclei, you can see alpha spins, they occupy the upper cone and then pointing towards the mostly towards the applied field strength. Okay, whereas the beta spins are pointing downward direction, they are basically opposing the applied magnetic field strength. So this actually, because of uh, this particular situation, I mean, because of the application of the external magnetic field strength, okay, so what happens is that we will see a more number of alpha spins pointing towards the parallel to the applied field strength, and then less number of nuclei will be pointing towards the downward direction. Okay, so this is very simple, that you have a normal population difference on the spin distribution in absence of the external magnetic field strength. Okay, so if there is no magnetic field, you can see most of the nuclei. Of course, there is slight. You can see you can see a slight. You can see the equal distribution alpha and beta states. Therefore, there is no imbalance. But the moment you keep it in external magnetic fields, you can see most of the nuclei is pointing towards the applied field strength, and some of the nuclei still basically oppose the magnetic field strength. Okay, so these things are very important because to understand the NMR signal, it is very, very important. Please keep it in absence of external magnetic field. There is no imbalance and then randomly oriented, and as a result, there is no net magnetization, net or resultant magnetization. So there is no resultant magnetization in absence of external magnetic field. But the moment you place it in external magnetic field, we have excess number of alpha spins pointing towards towards the applied field direction, and then very less number of spins which are referred to as the beta spin pointing towards opposing the magnetic field. Therefore, there is an imbalance between the parallel and then opposing spins. So this is something that lead to a magnetization, and this magnetization what is referred to as the net magnetization. And then you can see that the classical description of magnetization is this. So in principle, the same thing I have just already described the concept. So classically, if you want to understand the net magnetization vector, so you take the concept of spin, the spinning nuclei. It's like the spin nuclei. In presence of external magnetic field, you will have more number of alpha spins and you have less number of beta spins. The difference is what is referred to as the net magnetization. Okay, so that magnetization, instead of showing everything, so we normally show it with a thick arrow. So you can see that the individual spins, what are these things actually? These thin line arrows are actually represents the individual spins. Okay, and these individual spins, you have more number of alpha, you can see more alpha, and these are 5 spins pointing opposing, and then you have 6 spins basically parallel to the applied field direction. As a result, you have at least some net magnetization vector. This magnetization generally we represented with a thick arrow, and then this terminology also M or M0. Some textbook you will find it as a M0, and some textbook you will find this as a M. Okay, so capital M or M0 stands the net magnetization vector. Okay, so this is very, very important. And what happens to the magnetization along the other direction? Why we are not talking about the other direction, that is x and y? Well, this is very simple. Since we have applied the magnetic field on particular direction, so you will find that you will have magnetization only in that particular direction. So other directions usually we don't consider, and moreover it is actually a zero. Okay, so the if you have a spinning bar magnet, so if you have a bar magnet, so along the applied field direction they try to align. Okay, other directions there will not be any alignment. So as long as you have a field in one particular direction, so we will have magnetization only in that particular direction. So other direction we need not to worry, and moreover it is zero. And the net magnetization concept you can also try to understand in terms of the quantum mechanical description, as I told you. So if you talk about in terms of nuclear spin energy state, then that particular description becomes the quantum description. Well, this is the scenario if you don't apply applied external magnetic field, and both the spin states are degenerate, and then all the spins are random and parallel to each other, therefore you don't see any magnetization. On the other hand, the moment you keep it in external magnetic field, so this is greater than zero situation, and this is less than, and this is basically B. Okay, so the moment you if the B is greater than zero, then they start splitting and into two energy state. Depending upon the strength of the applied magnetic field, you will have a splitting gap. Okay, and the splitting gap, and also the spins try to align, arrange between the two nuclear spin states. You can see here there are 6 spins actually arranging, basically occupied the alpha state, that is the lower nuclear spin state, and there are 5 spins basically. In this particular description, 5 spins are occupied the higher nuclear spin energy states. Okay, so since there is a difference between these population, right, alpha and beta spin state population, that is something that will cause the signal. Okay, that is something it will cause the NMR signal, and very straightforward we can understand the NMR, how it is recorded. Very simple, right? You have, since you have a net magnetization or net spin, so this spin, when you shine a light which is equivalent to the energy gap between these two nuclear spin states, then you will see a transition. Okay, so by absorbing by absorbing a radio frequency which is applied, okay, which is exactly precisely matching with the energy gap, then a alpha spin state basically make a transition from the lower alpha state to the beta spin. Okay, so alpha spins, you can see it is pointing parallel direction. Okay, parallel. Now the moment they absorb, the moment you supply a radio frequency which is exactly matching with this energy gap, then this alpha spin will make a transition, and then it will go to the beta state, and then its energy is going to be anti-parallel. So anti-parallel energy state, energy will be higher in energy. So it will make a transition, and then it will basically occupy, it will oppose the external field direction. So this is a simple thing that a quantum mechanical description gives it. But then this doesn't actually picturize the actual concept, actual instrumentation part of the NMR. That is the reason why people always prefer, when you talk, if you want to understand in a better way the NMR signal recording process, always people go to the other description, that is the classical description, which we will see from this slide onwards. Okay, so so far what we have seen is this. We try to understand that in absence and in presence of external magnetic field, what happens to the spins that we have tried to understand. Okay, and please remember that in presence of external magnetic field, that we have if you talk about quantum mechanical description, you have more population in the alpha state and less population in the beta state. Okay, And in terms of classical pictures, so you have more alpha spin pointing parallel to the applied field direction, and then less number of you have less number of spins pointing or opposing the applied field direction. That was the scenario. And since there is an imbalance between the parallel and anti-parallel spins, that basically gives rise what is referred to as the net magnetization. And this net magnetization is also referred to as that particular situation. I mean, this particular situation is also referred to as a thermal equilibrium. This is also referred to as the thermal equilibrium. What is that? Thermal equilibrium is nothing but in presence of external magnetic field, the spins actually aligned or distributed between the two nuclear spin energy states. So this depends upon the energy gap, right, and the applied field direction. Based on the energy gap, you will have a splitting, and based on the splitting, you will have certain number of alpha spins will occupy the lower energy state. Certain certain number of beta spins basically occupy the higher energy state. So this is also referred to as the thermal equilibrium. Okay, this is also referred to as the thermal equilibrium. Please remember this. And then in the second step, what happens in the process of recording NMR spectrum, first we have to keep the non-zero spin active nuclei in the external magnetic field. That is the first step. Then what happens to it? We have understood. Now the second step in NMR recording NMR spectrum is that we will apply the second step of recording the NMR spectrum. So we will apply a radio frequency pulse. So how the radio frequency pulse is applied is again is very nice concept to understand and to go through the fine detail, but I will not go to that, but I have simplified very little bit. I have simplified a lot of things. So I will give very cut short answer kind of thing, but if you are interested, you are always free to go and then search out all the textbook, and it is very nice actually. But briefly, you can understand how we apply radio frequency pulse. It is not that simply we take a radio frequency, that the megahertz, the frequency of megahertz frequency, you cannot just simply take and apply it. Okay, so there is a process. So the radio frequency is applied through a coil. Okay, and we don't apply a simple radio frequency pulse, but rather what we apply is a circularly polarized radio frequency. Please remember this. It's not just a simple radio frequency pulse. It is something else. So it is circularly polarized radio frequency. I'm sure that most of you know what is a plane polarized light and normal light. You know that how to produce a plane polarized light, by using a calcite crystal, we can actually separate out two different lights. So we have a parallel, the two components are there in the actual light. It is propagating in the three-dimensional space, so that we can separate out by using certain type of crystal. So especially the calcite crystal is the one. Okay, so that is polarization light. Okay, so that is what I mean by polarized. Okay, so a radio frequency is polarized. Okay, a radio frequency or a polarized radio frequency is applied. It's not just a polarized, but it is something like circularly polarized. Okay, so plane polarized is one thing. So that means you have a parallel component. In the normal thing, you have one component. You have the perpendicular. There is another component. There are two components. So in the usual plane polarized light, means basically it basically chop one component and then one component remains. That means that propagate only on particular plane. Whereas circularly polarized, this particular plane, if you can rotate it, okay, you have one component, light is propagating. You just imagine a light component which is propagating in a plane. This plane, you can, if you are able to rotate it, okay, if you are able to rotate it, then that is something what is referred to as the circularly polarized radio frequency. Okay, this circularly polarized radio frequency is something that is generally applied in the NMR spectrometer to record the NMR signal. Okay, so how do we apply and which direction we apply? Well, it is applied through a coil, what is referred to as the transmittance coil. Okay, a coil, what is referred to as the transmittance coil. So in the NMR spectrometer, so we have two different coils. One is transmittance coil or transmitter coil, and then there is another one is a receiver coil. Receiver coil. There are two coils, and usually this is the direction. You can see here there is a coil in the y direction. You can see there is a coil. Okay, so this is the coil through which normally the circularly polarized radio frequency is applied. Okay, are you following? So in this particular direction, why we are choosing? Well, there are historical reasons. Well, so and the receiving coil is something that I have just spelled out. That will be along the x-axis. Okay, we will see that later. But for the time being, what you try to remember is that the circularly polarized radio frequency is applied through y direction. Okay, then what happens? Well, you remember in the model, in the picture, what is shown here. So you have a net magnetization, that is M0. Okay, that is pointing along the z direction, and then under this condition, okay, under this condition, through a coil we are applying a circularly polarized radio frequency. Okay, since the radio frequency is circularly polarized and then it is oscillating, then naturally there is something called induced magnetic field. Okay, if a radio frequency is passing through a coil, basically in the perpendicular direction we can see an induced magnetic field according to the classical electromagnetism. Okay, so we can observe a radio frequency, we can observe a induced magnetic field in the perpendicular direction. Okay, in the perpendicular direction. What is that what is the perpendicular direction? Well, it is generally along the z direction. Well, it is generally along the z direction. Okay, so when you apply circularly polarized radio frequency along the y direction, this basically induces a secondary magnetic field B1 along the z-axis. Okay, so if this B1 is basically matches with the precisional frequency of this net magnetization, that particular condition, what is referred to as the Larmor frequency condition or the resonating frequency condition. Please remember that the net magnetization vector is not just sitting ideally, it is basically precessing in the external magnetic field. So as if there is no external magnetic field, then the situation is different. But the moment you keep it there, basically the individual spins basically precess, right? So that is what we are saying, that this is precessing. What is the frequency? Well, you can calculate depending upon the magnetic field strength, and the Larmor frequency is the one. Okay, so the M is the net magnetization vector, and this is actually precessing in a normal situation before applying the secondary magnetic field. Now I started saying secondary magnetic field B1. Okay, we don't apply B1 as such by putting another magnet. Okay, so actual magnet B0 is the static magnet. Okay, whereas the B1 is nothing but the induced magnetic field applied or produced because of the applied circularly polarized radio frequency. Okay, if this induced magnetic field is matching well with the Larmor frequency of the net magnetization vector, so that particular condition, what is referred to as the resonance condition. Okay, so when we achieve a resonance condition, okay, when we have a resonance condition, there is some interesting thing happen. Okay, what is that? This net magnetization vector actually tips. It basically tips to a certain angle from its original direction, and then it basically starts rotating in that particular plane. Okay, so when there is a resonance condition, What is the resonance condition? If the induced magnetic field, which is basically generally produced through the circularly polarized radio frequency application. So what is happening is that the net magnetization vector tips. Tip means basically it changes from its original direction, and then it basically start precessing in that particular plane. Okay, in which plane it is basically precessing is actually, again, it is a matter of discussion. We will see that. But usually in NMR experiment, uh, the B1 is something that it is applied such that the net magnetization vector tips and then tips to 90-degree angle, and then it basically rotates in XY plane. Okay, like this. So the B1 is chosen chosen such that this net magnetization vector tips. Originally it is along the Z direction, but after the application of this B1 induced magnetic field, then basically it comes to x-axis. Sir, why only it comes to x-axis? Well, it is possible that you can also tip this particular net magnetization vector even along the minus z-axis. Even you can also think over that particular direction, 270. Even you can think of even this direction. So it depends upon, there are certain parameter uh, based on which basically at any angle this net magnetization vector can be made to precess in that particular angle. So how do we do that? Well, this is a little bit of tricky part. You know that, so what is the frequency? Okay, and what is the resonance condition? I'm sure that now you have understood. So the induced magnetic field is generally created through the application of the circularly polarized light, a radio frequency. Okay, when we have a induced magnetic field B1, and already the magnetization vector M0 is precessing with another precessing frequency. When there is a match between these two things, okay, please remember that the net magnetization vector along the Z direction, and through the y-axis, through the coil, polarized light is applied, circularly polarized radio frequency is applied, so that the B1 will be perpendicular. That means it will be aligning with respect to the applied field direction. Since you have a two magnetic field pointing towards in the same direction, so there will be a nice correlation between these two magnetic field. They interact, and then that particular situation, okay, that particular situation, what is referred to as the resonant condition. Okay, that means both the net magnetization vector, it will also, initially it is precessing because of the applied external magnetic field, static magnetic field. But then the moment you apply the B1 same as the B0, then what happens? The M0 precess not because of the B0, but then because of the B1. Therefore, the Larmor frequency, of course, in other words, the Larmor frequency is nothing but, well, it is gamma H cross by, H cross B0 by gamma, right? So that is the frequency. Okay, initially we have written Larmor frequency as the gamma B0 by 2 pi, but when you have a resonance condition, the Larmor frequency is also equivalent to gamma B1 by 2 pi. B1 by 2 pi. Okay, this is very important. So, well, what is the frequency? What is the frequency? Frequency is nothing but the number of oscillations per second, right? According to the definition, frequency is nothing but the number of oscillations per second. Now, what is the periodic time, or what is the time? Okay, it is the time that it is taken for completing one particular oscillation. Suppose if you take a sinusoidal wave, so starting from starting point to the complete starting point to the ending point, that is completing the one oscillation. So that is the time it takes, right? That particular time, what is referred to as the periodic time. So how do you get basically the periodic time? Periodic time, we can get it from the frequency. The reciprocal value of the periodic time is taken to be the periodic time. okay, or vice versa, both are true. Okay, reciprocal value of frequency, we can equate it to the periodic time. Okay, what is the periodic time? That is the time that it is taken to complete one cycle. But in this case, please remember that our oscillation is not a sinusoidal wave, but then it is a rotation. So what is the rotation? What is the time it is taken for completing one particular rotation is a periodic time. And then suppose, okay, that is something that we can calculate, right? So gamma b1, so the Larmor frequency is given by gamma b1 by, okay, 2 pi. That is the Larmor frequency. Suppose if you take the inverse of this, that is 2 pi by gamma b1 is nothing but the periodic time. Okay, is nothing but the periodic time. So you just imagine that if you take 1/4, I mean one fourth of that particular periodic time, then that becomes this quantity. That becomes this quantity. It is nothing but pi by 2, multiplied by 1 over gamma b1. How did I get it? Well, this is the periodic time. Periodic time is nothing but the reciprocal of the Larmor frequency. And once we have that one, so I'm considering a time that is 1/4. That means 1/4 of the total periodic time. If you consider, that becomes basically pi by 2 multiplied by 1 over gamma b1. You can see what is a pi by 2. Pi by 2 is the angle, and then it is nothing but the 90 degree. That means the periodic time, okay, periodic time depends upon the two factors, that is gamma and b0. So depending upon the nuclei that you are thinking and the applied frequency, so the periodic time can change it. Okay, so typically, suppose if you want to make your magnetic vector, net magnetization vector, to be oscillating in a particular direction, that is 90 degree, so you have to apply a time of, okay, I'm telling another version. So this also means, okay, 1/4 of periodic time is nothing but pi by 2 1 over gamma b1. Okay, that means, in other words, if you want to make your net magnetization vector to precise in a xy plane 90 degree, that means you have, this is the original position, z direction. Now 90 is nothing but your this plane. So if you wanted your magnetization vector to be precise in this particular direction, then what you should do is that you have to apply the radio frequency, that is the b1, for this amount of time. Okay, this is the amount of time that you have to apply. Only then it basically precise. So depending upon this gamma and b, so there are different type of pulses are possible. Okay, different type of pulses are possible. So this is 90 degree. This we actually call 90 degree pulse. Okay, so b1 is what? It is the circularly polarized radio frequency. Okay, is related to the time. Depending upon the time, how much you apply, the magnetization vector, which is precising and pointing towards the z direction, will tip to a certain angle. So this angle is decided by what? The applied field. Okay, how much time that you apply this circularly polarized radio frequency, that basically decides the angle at which basically it tips and then rotates in that particular direction. Okay, so this is possible by changing the periodic times. So different type of pulses are possible. So normally this is called pulse. 1/4 of the time, what we call it as a 90 degree pulse. 90 degree pulse. Why we said 90? Because there is a pi by 2. Okay, similarly pi, 180 degree pulse is also possible. 270 pulse also possible. In between any angle, between 0 and 360, any angle pulse is possible in principle and in practical. Actually, these are the fundamentals to record the MRI images also. Okay, so MRI images is somewhat complex than what we study in NMR spectroscopy. So people will be applying different pulses with the different time delays and other things. Even we also use different stuff, especially when we go for a two-dimensional NMR and three-dimensional NMR. We also talk about different pulse sequences. But a simple NMR spectrum, that is one-dimensional NMR spectrum, doesn't require too many complicated pulses. Only just you place it in external magnetic field and just apply the radio frequency, circularly polarized radio frequency, and then you will detect the signal. Okay. Now the question is how you will detect the signal. It doesn't actually explain how a signal will be rotating, a signal will be generating. Well, so I told you the story. What we have learned is that, okay, if you apply a certain amount of time this RF pulse, so this will tip to a certain angle. It basically presses. Now, typically in an NMR experiment, for recording a one-dimensional NMR spectrum of any compound, this is what it is done. You place it in external magnetic field, and people will be applying the radio frequency pulse. Okay, and this pulse duration is typically of the 10 to 12 microseconds. Okay, so the pulse, what is that pulse? Pulse is nothing but the radio frequency, circularly polarized radio frequency, will be applied to a certain amount of time, and that indirectly what we say is a pulse. Why? Because based on the applied field, based on the duration that you apply the radio frequency, so the net magnetization vector basically presses in a particular plane. That is why it is referred to as the pulse. Okay, for a simple spectrum, it is one-dimensional NMR spectrum. It is pi by 2 pulse, nothing but the 90-degree pulse. So when you apply about 10 to 12 microseconds of duration of the radio frequency pulse, this actually presses in a XY plane. 90-degree means what? This is Z direction, and you have X, and the other direction is Y. So when you 90 degrees is nothing but the XY plane. So the moment you apply the radio frequency for an about 10 to 12 seconds, this basically tips and then it start rotating in a XY plane. Now, this particular thing is not the actual thermal equilibrium. This particular thing is not an actual thermal equilibrium. This is not the original position, right? In the static magnetic field, we have a different things happen. Okay, so it basically presses in the XY plane. It basically presses in the XY plane, and then this, as long as you apply the pulse, it will presses. Where it will presses in the XY plane itself. The moment you stop applying the radio frequency pulse, then you don't basically see the magnetization vector still processing in the thing, but it will try to go back its original position. Why? Because that is the actual thermal equilibrium, right? Please remember that the radio frequency pulse is applied only for about 10 to 12 seconds. Afterwards, it will be stopped. As long as it is applied, that is duration about 10 or 12 microseconds, then it will process in the XY plane, but later it will try to go back. So initially it is rotating in this plane. Now it will try to go back its original position. This is the original position. What is that? Pointing along the applied field direction. That is the original position. But then you know that this moment, rotating in this particular x-axis, rotating in x-axis, xy plane, and going back to the original position, that is along the z direction, it doesn't happen instantaneously, but rather it happens through exponential mechanism. That is what it basically slowly relaxes. Okay, it basically slowly relaxes to actual position. Okay, so this slow relaxation is something that when you try to fit that particular thing, you will get a time, and it depending upon the nuclei which is being studied. Okay, you will have different time scale, time constant. So depending upon the nuclei, it will take certain amount of time to go back to original thing. So it follows basically exponential thing. So that is something called if you are able to deduce the time information, then you will be able to get the frequency information. So that is what the overall explanation about this one. And classically we can understand this phenomena like this. So whatever I have said, I'm trying to explain in terms of a animation. You can see originally when you see this, it is pointing along this direction. So when the pulse is applied, it is coming back to xy plane. But then the pulse is not a continuous pulse, but the moment the pulse is stopped, then it will try to go back to its original position. You can see that this net magnetization vector slowly, initially it basically rotated for some time in the xy plane, but later, since the pulse is stopped, it is trying to go back to its original position. Okay, so since it is going back to its original position, okay, that means what? Basically, it is basically rotating, right? Overall, if you try to understand the magnetic net magnetization vector, it is not at a constant position. It is basically moving, isn't it? Okay, if it is moving, well, this is the tricky part and clever thing people have noticed. This is where people will keep the receiving coil. Okay, this is where along the x direction you will have generally the receiving coil. Okay, now this receiving coil will be absorbing the net magnetization vector. Okay, when it will stop, the moment the B1 is stopped, the moment the B1 is stopped, then the X started counting what is happening to Z, what is happening to M0. Okay, M0 is basically, previously it was under the influence of the radio frequency, but now it is no longer under the influence. It is on its own, it is trying to go back to the original position, right? It also means that basically it is moving. Okay, and moreover, it is a magnetic vector. Any magnetic field, if it is moving, then we can actually notice a current in the coil which is kept nearby. Okay, I'm sure that if you have a charged particle passing through the coil, then in the perpendicular direction we will see a magnetic field. Vice versa is also possible. If you have a magnetic field which is oscillating, okay, if you have a magnetic field which is oscillating or changing with respect to time, then you will see a current generation in the coil which is kept very nearby, right? That is exactly and precisely what happens in the NMR signal detection. Okay, so what is done ultimately is that you have the net magnetization vector in terms of external magnetic field, and by applying a circularly polarized light, so we try to make it precessing in the xy plane for a short duration by applying a 90-degree pulse, and then this pulse will be stopped afterwards. The moment you stop it and there is something coil in the other direction, that is the x direction, this will absorb the moment. Okay, so initially you will have a huge current generation. Why? Because you have a huge magnetic vector, but then later, as it is pointing towards the z direction, so the magnetization vector, basically net magnetization, reaches basically decays. Initially you will have a huge magnetization, but slowly it will decay. So this is another way of understanding things. Okay, there are different animations. You can see here how things are going on, right? And the signal, how it is, the spins are rotating accordingly. You will have this thing, and this is the rotating frame of axis, and how the net magnetization vector basically rotating, that is shown here. Okay, so this is a little bit complicated to go through the discussion of rotating frame of axis, but it's not necessary. But what I have explained to you is sufficient to understand this. Okay, so FID is something that is generally recorded. What is the FID? FID is the free induction decay. Free induction decay. So where from it has come? Well, I have already said that initially we have this, and then afterwards the net magnetization vector, after stopping the B1, then it is freely decaying and it is going back to original position, right? Right. So this is what is referred to as a free induction decay. Free induction decay. Initially, it is having a huge vector, but then slowly it decays. Okay, because we are measuring. Please remember that we are measuring the magnetization in the XY plane. When it is when it is in the xy plane, we will have a maximum magnetization. But if it is going to the other direction, that is z direction, so the magnetization will basically reduces. Therefore, it basically decays. Initially you have a huge number, a huge amount of magnetization in the xy plane, but then slowly it decays. Okay. Right. So that is the thing. And if you have, and this is what I was referring to. And well, this is where it is given very nicely. So two different coils you can see here. This is the transmittance coil, RF input. It is written as RF input. It's nothing but the transmittance coil. And this is the receiving coil. Okay. So once you apply the radio frequency pulse, that will tip, as you have seen in the previous animation. It will basically circulate the magnetization in the xy plane, and then the moment the B1 is stopped, then the receiver coil actually start counting or start detecting the signal from the net magnetization vector. What is the basic principle? This is the basic principle. So if you have a bar magnet, when you pass through the basically when you move back and forth movements, then naturally you can find the current generation in the ammeter, right? And you have a coil, and through the coil or nearby coil, if you bring a bar magnet and move it, then what happens is that there is a current generation. So exactly, precisely the same principle logic is being used in NMR signal. And here the this is the magnetization. M0 is our magnetization vector, which is actually under the influence for some time, for a few microseconds. Okay, but afterwards it is stopped. That means it is freely coming. So that means it is freely decaying. Since it is freely decaying at that stage, so nearby, that is the coil. The coil, people in the coil, there will be a signal generation, that is nothing but the current generation, and that current is something that will be amplified, and then the spectrum will be generated. Okay, so this is what it is. Well, yeah, another animation, you can see the entire process. What I have said again is represented here. Okay, so initially it is moving. Accordingly, you will have a signal generation. So this is called a free induction decay, a time versus the intensity information. What is referred to as the free induction decay. Initially, it will be more. I think, let me show. There must be another decay. Yeah. Well, this is what we call it as the free induction decay. Okay, the pulse is applied. Okay, this actually tells you the pulse width. Okay, this is the pulse width. It can be shorter, it can be longer. It depends upon the nuclei and type of an NMR experiment. This pulse duration changes. And afterwards, when you stop it, naturally, then the FID, so it slowly decays. Okay, this is the maximum, and slowly the intensity decays. When you try to basically, this is the intensity versus time. Okay, this axis, if you think like this is x-axis, and this is the x-axis, and then sorry, this is a time coordinate, and then this is the intensity versus time, and then slowly it decays. Now this is an exponential function. Okay, if you try to fit this data, you will get certain information. Okay, now in the sample, we don't have one particular nuclei. We have so many nuclei. So that is where NMR becomes so beautiful. If you have only one frequency, we will see only one particular signal. But normally that doesn't happen. But we have, in most of the cases, we have several thousands of nuclei will be present. And that is where the NMR becomes so interesting. Okay, so in a normal situation, we have only one particular, in an ideal situation, when we discuss about theory, we only talk about one particular nuclei, but then in reality, so sample contains so many protons, sample contains so many 13 carbon, sample contains so many nitrogen, sample contains so many 19 fluorine, right? So these nuclei are so many. As a result, this becomes so interesting. And yeah, so these are different type of signals you can see here. And depending upon this thing. So another interesting thing what has happened is that, so this time versus intensity information is something that we cannot understand to interpret and understand the chemical environment of the sample, and also to analyze the sample which has formed. So time is something that it is not very convenient thing. So people, what they do is that, so this FIDs are actually converted into a frequency data. So as I told you, FID is a free induction decay, which actually nothing but it is a recording of the net magnetization vector, how it behaves after stopping the radio frequency, after application of the radio frequency pulse. Okay, so when you stop the pulse, naturally it decays. Okay, so how it behaves, how it decays is the it tells you, FID tells you, the pattern of the SID tells you how it basically decays. Now, this FID is not very much convenient to interpret our data. Therefore, it will be converted into frequency data. So that way is done by usually by a Fourier transformation. Okay, most of these spectrometers automatically they basically come into Fourier transformation. By default, it is integrated with the software. You don't have to do anything. So mathematicians already developed a Fourier transformation analysis. So it is just a mathematical software. So when you have the time information will be converted into the frequency information by this process. Okay, at least if you are of a mathematical background, probably would have studied what is Fourier transformation. This is how one can actually convert a time information to a frequency information. So this is an FID, one of the FID. You can imagine like this. The time information, FID is nothing but time versus signal intensity. So it basically decreases slowly. And this you can convert to a frequency information through a process, what is referred to as the Fourier transformation. So NMR spectrometer, some people also call it as Fourier transform NMR spectrometers. Okay, so it is nothing but a small tool or software tool that is there, which is already embedded. So automatically it generates one particular signal. I mean, it can automatically it converts into frequency thing. So frequency is something that we can understand depending upon the depending upon where exactly the frequency signal is observed. We can actually interpret that information to the nature of the nuclei that we are actually studying. Okay. So this is the overall process through of the NMR signal recording. And if you have any doubt, you please let me know. And if you don't understand, please raise your hand and ask me straight away. There are two coils. One is x-axis coil, y-axis.
On the x-axis, yes, x-axis coil.
X-axis coil, what do we call it as a receiving coil. This receiving coil try to observe the net magnetization vector, how it basically coming back to its original position, coming back to its thermal equilibrium. What is thermal equilibrium or coming back? Coming back is something that when you place external magnetic field, before applying the radio frequency pulse, what is the situation? That particular situation, what we call it as a thermal equilibrium situation. So there, the magnetization vector, net magnetization vector, just pointed along the z direction. But because you applied the radio frequency pulse, it basically did some kind of exercise, and again it came back. It is trying to come back. Okay. Now the receiver coil will try to observe after stopping the pulse, radio frequency pulse, how this net magnetization vector is changing, how it is basically going back to its original position. That is something actually related to the inherent property of the nuclei under investigation. Okay, so the coil will try to just record the signal. How it is recording, the principle is this. Already in this slide you can see very nicely. So now there is nothing. Now the net magnetization vector, we made it to rotate in the XY plane. Okay, now it is coming back and it is oscillating. It is not static. Since it is oscillating, the magnetic field is changing. We know from the simple electromagnetism, if you have a changing, if you have a magnetic field which is changing with respect to time, then we can see appropriate current in the ammeter, right? So this is the basic electromagnetism theory. So this coil will receive, the coil is actually kept such that it basically activated just after stopping the pulse, and then it record the signal. So the current basically, it generates the current. Am I answer your question?
Yes, sir. It's clear. Thank you, sir.
What about others?